Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the Illusion Horror and Con interview series, where we actually have a special guest today and a project that we've been working on in the background for quite some time now. And we're happy to share about it as it's coming to a bit more fruition. With me, I have Crystal, also a member of the Illusion Horror Con. And yeah, Crystal, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm Crystal. I'm 1/3 of the Illusion Horror Con. And yeah, I do some gaming, I do some writing. You can find me on the Illusion Horror and Con Discord. I'm lurking there most of the time, so you can, yeah, drop me a note and yeah.
Fantastic. And our special guest star, Wesley. Nice to have you with us.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the writer and designer of A Very B.E.A.R System. It's a narrative-based system designed to keep the story at the forefront of the game.
Fantastic.
Been playing games for a long time, and I've played many systems. And I thought I'd have a go at writing one.
And writing you did. Yeah, so today we're going to talk a bit about AVBS, as it's abbreviated, and what is unique about it, and maybe what you can expect from this new system that is coming out soon on Kickstarter. So a disclaimer that both Crystal and I have been collaborating and working on this as well. And so we're just happy to share kind of our insight and why this is a fun system to maintain compared to all the others.
And we'll share a little bit more about our collaborations at the end of this video.
Exactly. So yeah, let's start with the first question. Wesley, what inspired you for ABS?
So I probably have to go back a little bit. As I say, I've been playing tabletop role-playing games for a few years now. Probably lucky enough that I've probably played as much as I've GM'd over that time. Started out early with some very well-known systems, some very crunchy systems, which I thought were great at the time. Had a great time playing and running those. Over time, as I got more familiar with the rules and the hobby and started to see other games and how they worked, I started to find sort of like a strange irony in that the more complex, the more rules heavy the system was, the more restrictive it seemed to present itself to people. And what I mean by that is in the sense of players that wanted to achieve something, the expectation was always that it fell neatly into one of the prescribed rules or abilities that were already written, instead of just being able to handle things sort of pragmatically within the narrative. I found more often that people were afraid to venture outside of, my character wants to do this thing. It was more of, how are the rules going to allow me to do the thing? And yeah, I found it, like I said, I think the best way is a strange irony that the more sort of abilities and rules and mechanics the system had, the more it kind of enforced this kind of don't do anything unless it's written down in the rules or abilities. Conversely, I started to play some lighter systems, and a few well-known names come to mind, and I found that sometimes the opposite might have been true, in that without sort of this solid framework of rules, leaving a lot to interpretation meant that sometimes the sort of GM and the players had a bit of like analysis paralysis, where without some like guidance on how to do things, just being told, hey, you can do anything, left people with too much choice, and people struggle to decide, well, how do I do this? What do I do? What can my character do? And I think it's hard for a GM on either side of that scale to balance that. And I think there's always this idea of like making a decision on the spot. I think that sometimes players and GMs can be afraid to make a decision because they think, is it going to break the game? Am I going to interact with a rule that I don't know about that's going to come up later? Am I going to set something up for later that comes up and then it's a problem? So there's probably some people think that, you know, that's the GM's job, or that's the GM's fault, or if the GM's not articulating things. And I don't really agree with that. So I disagree on the main point that it's the GM's job to arbitrate all of that. So my background is in business optimization, process analysis, things like that. So going into businesses and looking at their processes and seeing how things can be done better, how we can make things more efficient, reduce waste. A big name in the sort of change methodology world, Edwards Deming. And Edwards Deming is very famous in that sort of change methodology. And he said, one of his quotes, and I'm paraphrasing, but 90% of problems come from process, not people. And he's got a very famous quote: "A bad system will beat a good person every time." And what he's getting at is, if your process, if your business, if your game system has room for uncertainty, if it has areas that will allow for, you know, people to make, maybe not mistakes in the sense of a game system, but maybe for a process to make, you know, if there's opportunity there for failing, then people are going to find those failings. It's not always the person's fault. If you set someone up to find, you know, to fail, then you're going to inevitably have that. So I don't always agree that it should just always be up to the GM to make sure that everything runs smoothly. I think, for me, as with a business process, the system should just be written better. It should provide the solid framework so that people can do things confidently without there being as many opportunities for ambiguity or failure. So it's a very long-winded way of me saying what inspired me to write AVBS was I wanted a system that give enough structure to help you feel confident, but not so much that it interrupts the story with that constant, like, oh, if I do this, am I going to break this rule? Is it going to interact with this ability? Is this system going to fail because of it? So I want people to be able to, I want to empower the GM and the players to be able to make informed choices in character, in the narrative, without being confined by lists of rules and restrictions, and without worrying that if I do that thing, is it going to break a rule over here?
Fantastic.
Yeah. Some systems were too gamified, others were not gamified enough. And
yeah. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great systems out there, and most systems do the thing they want to do really well. And I think what AVBS is trying to do is kind of be a bridge between really heavy rules, crunchy systems that prescribe everything, and systems that are very loose and, you know, this term of rules light, where a lot is left to interpretation. I wanted to give freedom of choice and give an environment to explore the narrative with enough of a framework to keep things consistent and balanced without over-prescribing every action and ability.
Mm-hmm. Then that makes it, it helps to make it a lot more narrative-driven and story first rather than rules first, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think as you mentioned, like there are a great bunch of fantastic systems out there. I mean, we are also supporting and helping it with other systems, and we enjoy all of them. But there's clearly a difference. When I first saw your initial draft for the rule system, which was quite fun. You can elaborate on that a bit later. one of the things that I think first popped out is as as good as some system or a lot of systems are for their specific trope, their theme, their setting. AVBS is relatively agnostic in the aspect that you can apply it to fantasy, you can apply it to gothic horror, you can apply it to sci-fi, you can do quite a bunch of things. So, what are some other different or unique aspects of AVBS that you would like to highlight here?
Yeah, it's so I think to that point, there are a lot of system or setting and theme agnostic systems out there. I think what I tend to find is that even a setting agnostic system usually designed around a core theme, and then there are bolt-ons. So you might have like a core rule set, and then you have a sci-fi bolt-on or a section on magic for fantasy, and those things kind of you're expected to sort of blend and pick and choose the bits you need. Whereas AVBS is designed from the ground up with the concept of genre agnostic application in mind. So you don't need other supplements or this extra rule set, or you don't need another setting book to come out later. It's the entire core rule book, and all of the rules are designed to work in any setting and theme that you like. Unique's an interesting term. Probably debate the uniqueness of the tabletop role-playing game Hobbit in general. But I think what AVBS does well, so I mentioned briefly about it providing that intuitive framework that empowers the sort of players and the GMs to sort of consider what will or might happen in the narrative, and it strives to drive that character and storytelling and that sort of decision making. There's a few key design choices that sort of support that. We've got several mechanics that are designed around that theme. For example, combat is a common thing that everyone enjoys in the tabletop game. So we don't have a sort of prescribed ability or actions list costs for things in a combat encounter. We don't have rules for measurements and range. Instead, we ask the players and GMs to just think about being pragmatic. What's actually possible in that moment? What can that character actually do in that situation, in that environment, with these things going on around them? The idea is to sort of help drive it from a narrative point of view. It's not always about what kit or ability or something the character has. It's what's going on in the scene, what's happening around them. We don't always necessarily care in AVBS how many steps it is to the end of the room, or how much distance between you and the speeding car. It's more about the scene and what's possible. I think there's a lot of systems go kind of deep into the tactical element, or they go very light and leave everything to sort of improvisation. I think, as I mentioned, AVBS tries to sit in the middle of that to provide sort of a strong enough framework that it feels consistent, and it applies, again, as we said, across different types of game, but to keep the rules interruption out of it. A playtester recently, he said to me, they love the game because you could potentially go a whole session without rolling dice. For one, they said they liked how engrossed in the RP they became. So the whole table was sort of so invested in the RP, it didn't come up or even occur to them like, well, we're playing a mechanical game that we need to go get the dice for now. They just they were able to just play the entire session out through RP, and the rules they really support that. They don't sort of linger in the background waiting to jump out and say, "Aha, you're doing a thing, you must roll a dice now, or you must now interact with the mechanic." They sort of leave you to keep that flowing. And the other reason they gave was that the mechanics really empower that sort of narrative understanding of your character. So what I find in AVBS with people, they think less about, I've got this many stats in my strength, and more about my character is narratively quite strong and imposing, or in that kind of view. So they do kind of think of it more of a character as opposed to a stat block. I think it's important though to say that the goal has never been sort of fewer rules or not having the mechanics. It's you might think of this idea of like rules light or those kind of phrases. I don't think I won't use rules light to describe AVBS. There's a lot of support in the rule book. I'd say it's very pragmatic, common sense, and intuitive to role play. And we've got, like I say, we've got several mechanics to support that idea.
Yeah, that was something that drew me to AVBS as well. I mean, personally, as a GM, I'm not very. I don't like to ask for many roles. I do like to let the role play sort of speak for itself. I like it when players get engrossed. I want the story to shine rather than the there to be like crunchy mechanics or have to stop role play in order to roll some stuff. But, you know, I also like that there is a choice of, let's say there's a GM who prefers to have a more role heavy, mechanics heavy game. And that's their style. That's how they choose to play. So they can also decide to play AVBS that way as well. They can have it be a more mechanics heavy if that's the table that they want to run.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have that. We have a mechanism where the GM can choose to not roll dice and use sort of different thresholds or sort of assumptions about the NPCs or the environment rather than rolling dice. And like you said, they absolutely can roll dice if they want to. There's the mechanism there to create opposed rolls, roll back against the players, roll for NPCs, roll for situations. But at the same time, we provide the guidance to say, if you don't want to roll dice, if you want a faster, more streamlined game, if you want to just handle it narratively, here's how you do it, and here's how you reduce the dice rolling at the table, if that's what you want.
I actually also want to mention that specifically, since I generally run a lot of very horror-driven and personalized scenarios that are focusing more on themes, atmosphere, and character development in different settings, obviously. I definitely appreciate it. Like as one of the main things was, I think the first thing that you told me about the system was like, you can run the system with just a character sheet because every information you need to know about your character is on there, and everything about the rules and mechanics that are essential for the players is on there. And that is something that if you run a lot of games with a variety of players from anywhere, it becomes often a tough choice for players. Like, how long does it take them to kind of pick something up, and how, if they want to try something new, then you explain longer the system and mechanics of how it works rather than to actually play the game. And I do like that, especially. I think what highlights for me is that even if you reduce it further to the most minimalistic thing, we have a character bio sentence that pretty much can explain the character in its core concept quite well. And you can just run a game with using that sentence, which I find very fantastic in a sense of it explains enough of information that a experienced GM, I would say, can easily kind of work with this and doesn't have to think about like statistics or mechanics about how to integrate certain elements. No, you have that one sentence and you can run the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was one of the core design principles of AVBS is I wanted to create a game that when you're playing, you have to reach for the rule book as little as possible. So the idea is that you're at the table and you're playing, and everything I've said already so far kind of supports that. I wanted to make the game so intuitive and easy to understand. All of the wording in the book is very natural language. We use a couple of key word concepts and we highlight everything that's a key word and explain that in the rules. even the keywords themselves are very intuitive in terms of natural language usage. We don't try use specialized or quirky phrases or anything like that. But going back to the point about the character sheet, yeah, so like I say, I wanted to create the game that was designed in a way that once you sort of understood the key concept of it, you hardly ever have to lean over and open the book at the table, and you can play it. And an extension of that design philosophy was making sure the character sheet, exactly as you said, included everything you need. A player, once they understand those 7 or 8 core mechanics, they should hardly ever need to think, I just need to check the rule in the book for that. Everything's on the sheet, everything's there clear. Again, very natural language used on the character sheet to understand what fits where. So hopefully that comes across. It seems to work well in the playtest as well, and lots of people, like you said, they really appreciate that concept of that one sentence mini bio where we can summarize the entire character or NPC into a single sentence, and how you complete that sentence gives you that one high-level, succinct understanding of who that character is. And like you say, GMs could use that to run an entire game of just single-sentence NPCs if they wanted to. Or to Crystal's point, feel free to dive into the nuts and bolts of the system and create full NPC character sheets with mechanics and stats and abilities. To the point of the game is designed to keep sort of rule interactions and mechanics very light, and to keep it in the narrative. Again, as Crystal said, we do cater for people who want to provide that little bit more rigor and crunch. We even include sort of probability tables for dice rolls and what the likelihood of rolling a certain score on a certain bonus or penalty. We've got probability tables in there to support the GMs that want that, and for those that don't, they don't need to worry about it. They can just run the game narratively.
And I think we mentioned a lot of running the game and mechanics. What are the core mechanics? What are the basic elements of how you play AVBS?
So the character has 5 main qualities, and those 5 main qualities represent their ability in certain areas. So potentially how tough they are, how fast they are. The similar thing that you'll see in many tabletop role-playing games, they might call them attributes, might call them stats. We call them qualities. It's the core qualities of your character. Those qualities tell you how many dice you roll. So the dice we use are 6-sided dice, D6s. Whenever you roll a die, you're looking for a 5 or a 6, typically. Any 5 or 6 you roll counts towards you achieving a task. Some tasks you might need more than 1 success to succeed, effectively. And there are things that sit around the core qualities that support that. So, for example, the character's profession, so what they do in the world, who they are, might influence that. So profession makes the successes you roll more powerful. So any 6s you roll, for example, may count twice if your profession is involved in that role. Characters have expertise. So we have I would consider it a skill-less system. So we don't have lists of skills where people choose what skills their characters are good at. Generally, how good you are at a thing is based on how you describe your character, the narrative, your profession, and your quality scores. Expertise are an area of sort of dedicated study or focus, or something that your character really excels in. So if you have expertise in circumstances where it's relevant, you might automatically succeed at simple tasks. So expertise allows you to have a character that, if they are really good in an area of a particular area of study or a topic, then why would they ever fail at that? Why would you ever even need to roll dice? You should just assume if the character is a world-class gymnast, they have no trouble climbing through a window. So we just assume that they can do that task, right? And this really empowers that narrative play, that way of sort of streamlining the game and not rolling dice and saying that character is an expert in that field. They can climb through that window. It's easy for them. Ineptitudes, conversely, are something your character is not very good in. And if you have ineptitudes, you might struggle to achieve a result. It means that your dice rolls are weaker, effectively, in that area. And we support sort of balanced and rounded characters in character creation. So character creation is designed to keep characters very sort of rounded and whole. It's very difficult in AVBS to build sort of very mechanically overbearing sort of tall characters. You sort of aim for these more well-rounded, again, supporting that narrative of more real sort of characters with strengths and weaknesses. So for every expertise you have to have an ineptitude to balance it. So it doesn't have to be related in any way, but if you have a strength, then you're going to have a weakness somewhere. We balance the game that way and say, tell us all the things your character's great at, but what are they also not so good at? What interesting opportunities do we have for role play? What sort of challenges can we personalize to your character? And we do that through ineptitude. And then we have a mechanic that we call mind, body, and soul. So characters have 3 attributes, mind, body, and soul. And the core mechanic for mind, body, and soul is when a character is in a situation where they might fail at a test, they can push their mind, their body, or their soul to the limits to try and achieve that result. And the mind, body, and soul attributes are finite resources that the character spends. They spend that resource to buy more dice, effectively, to give them a better chance to succeed when they're attempting something in a sort of critical or high stress moment. They can choose to sort of sacrifice a little bit of themselves to push through that, something that they might not normally be able to achieve. That is sort of the core concept. There are other things that sit on the periphery of that, support that, things like aspects and aces and these little sort of nice little unique things that sit around that. So aces are they're an ace up the sleeve, essentially. So characters have sort of like a one-time use sort of card that they can play to get themselves out of a bad situation or smooth over something that didn't go quite well, or just use it to their advantage if they like. Once you play an ace, got to wait to get that back. You've got to have a nice GM who might award you one for some nice role play, or wait till you get an improvement opportunity. And then talking about improvement opportunities, so your character can earn improvement points over the course of the game, and they're defined points by the GM. You'll be able to spend those improvement points to buy new advantages and more dice and little quirks and bonuses for your character throughout the course of the game. And that's the core overview of the system.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, also some other things that we don't have to get into right here, but just to quickly overview them. There's a way to bring in superpowers, supernatural powers with an additional quality. There are ways to introduce afflictions to characters, depending on what kind of genre or what kind of role play you have in your system. I honestly, I kind of feel like the system is just a home brewer's dream, right? It's you can pretty much do whatever you want, genre-wise, character-wise, whatever, and just have the story that you want to tell without having to be bogged down by a lore system. As much as I truly love certain lore systems, it is very constraining sometimes when I have an idea and I just want to do that idea and not have to, qualify all my games with like, well, this is kind of with the lore system, but not really. So, forget about what you know about that lore.
Exactly. I want to play a bit I want to play a bit the devil's advocate here, and basically go back to, as you said, to the mechanics. So let's say a general task, you succeed with a 5 and 6 on a six-sided dice. That's 1/3 of the probabilities to succeed. Isn't that a bit much in order to succeed? So, like, would a GM not think, oh, the players will always succeed in their task?
So we have a range of difficulties. So the difficulty of a task can range from 1 to 4 successes. So typically 1 success is your sort of common everyday tasks, things that are not very strenuous, things that most people can do with a bit of sort of planning and foresight. So this sort of comes back a little bit to that automatic success criteria for expertise. So the expertise allows you to have 1 automatic success. So this is where I say those characters that are an absolute expert in that field can do all of the sort of baseline, normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill tasks in that field without even needing to roll dice, because they automatically succeed with 1 success. It's not to say that the GM can't decide, actually, in this given scenario, you're going to need 2 successes for this task, or you're going to need 3 successes, or even 4 successes. So that greatly increases the sort of probability of, also greatly reduces the probability on smaller dice pools, and you're going to need to leverage all of your other skills and abilities and other situational advantages to try and achieve sort of 3 or 4 successes, especially sort of with dice pools of around 4, 5, 6 dice. You might struggle from a probability point of view to get 3 or 4 successes just out of the just from a flat dice roll. So we have that sort of scaling difficulty of from 1 to 4. And then we have an impossible rating, which is if it's, some tasks.
If it's impossible.
Yeah.
Exactly. And also, since I've been running some playtests for it, I can also attest that if GMs are concerned about it, we had sessions where I think a significant portion of the players did not succeed at all, or sometimes, yes, succeeded quite frequently. But it is not too overbearing. So, like, even simplest tasks, and that is, again, I think also something that one can consider, because it is such a narrative-driven thing. You don't have to ask for a role for every single task or single thing. If it would fall into the occupation, the profession of the player character, there is no need to ask for a role unless there is a time constraint, or they try to do it in a specific narrative sense. But I think once you kind of start playing using the AVBS system, you might, in the first couple of hours, maybe be still inclined to look for checks and how often you do this. But the more you play it, I think that is a revelation that came to me was like, I ask less and less questions, and the only skill checks that I'm asking for are very specific because of a situational awareness, which is actually very freeing in the way that I run the games now. And I can fully focus on all the narrative, all the discussions between the characters. I think it is alleviating, and it helps to really focus on the narrative in the system. So that just maybe from my point. Crystal, you've also playtested and run the game. Would you have any other comments or ideas that you would ask as a devil's advocate that might be suspicious for new GMs?
Put me on the spot here.
Of course.
Always. Devil's advocate. I mean, when I initially was running AVBS, I was also running into the situation of possibly players being a little too overpowered. They succeeded a lot. But yeah, to that point, it was more so a situation of like, well, do I really need to ask for a role here? Do I really need to be playing it in this particular way, as opposed to just, they're good at something, so let them be good and let them do the thing. And then we can ask for roles elsewhere when it's a more challenging situation.
Yeah, and we have we handle this discussion in the in the section, that GM advice section. So we have paragraphs in there that talk to this point and try and get the GM thinking about when they do and don't need to ask for roles, and when the situation, when there's like I said, you mentioned it, the time constraint or the external pressure or a critical moment is the good time to ask for a role. But when they're just sat in a comfortable, in the library comfortably with a coffee and they're reading a book, do they need to make a roll to find the passage in that book? Most people are going to sit there and find that passage eventually. Just get on with it. Let's move the story. Let's narrate our way through that scene instead of looking for dice rolls.
Well, let's ask you maybe, Wes. When you look back, what was the most difficult thing, kind of when you designed it, in a sense of what were pain points that you ran into when designing the game?
I think,
from a mechanics perspective.
Yeah, I think generally combat is probably always the most difficult thing to handle. Combat is the area that you really need to get the balance in right, and it's very difficult to balance mechanics that support that narrative view without it just saying, here's some wishy-washy sentences and go work it out yourselves. To be able to write something that is both a solid framework that covers a combat scenario and any kind of combat scenario that the players of the GM could think about. Mm-hmm. Give it enough rigor so that it's balanced and works well, but still focus on that sort of narrative aspect. And I talk about this in the book as well, and I've written it in a way to try and have people think about a combat encounter as being an extension of the narrative and the story, as opposed to sort of this. Sometimes I think we've all been there. You're playing the tabletop role-playing game, and then combat breaks out, and there's a defined stop moment where we step away from the story and we go into maybe board game mode, and we're playing a tactical combat encounter, and then we resolve the encounter, and then we step back into narrative mode and start talking about the story again. And AVBS really tries to say, combat is part of the story. If the fight's happening, there's a reason for it, and the reason for it should be part of the story, and the conflict itself should be part of that plot. Let's keep it in that flow, and let's handle that narratively. And I think that was probably one of the hardest sections to write. And there's, you keep having to think of these sort of small cases, and what if this happens in the fight, and then I need to think about this, and then how much rigor do I put around this without becoming overbearing and putting too many rules and too many interactions in there, trying to keep everything very on the level of, let's just, again, like we said, everything needs to be on the character sheet. So I don't want 12 different combat abilities or interactions or things that can happen in a fight. I want 3 or 4 really core concepts that can handle a great variety of conflicts and fights. So yeah, combat is always a challenge, I think, to design.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, David and I have discussed this kind of ad nauseum, that we don't typically enjoy having combat in our games that we GM. We've talked about it in other videos, and the 3 of us have discussed it as well. But yeah, I think getting away from a more board gamey, like initiative, we need to stop and then make sure that the GM can properly adjudicate rules, depending on what happens or this happens, having like pages and pages and pages, like chapters of rule adjudication in a book, and then having to flip through it. Like, I've been there before. It's incredibly painful. And yeah, the way that combat is handled in this book is very intuitive. It's very, yeah, it doesn't stop the play. It
Yep.
continues with it, and then also it gives the GM a lot of choice as to whether or not they want to roll a ton of stuff and make it board gamey, or to not, and make it a little bit more narrative and sort of like a movie scene rather than a round in a board game.
No. Yeah, and we just had a very good example of a combat scene in our last playtest just recently, which was developing from narrative of a scene to it escalated into a combat. And before you even think about mechanics, the combat was done, and we were at the narrative kind of resolving this situation, and it was not as bad as I would have imagined, because again, I don't like combat, so like any combat scene is often for me like a chore. But yeah, a few simple things. We have included also flowcharts, so like it's very easy to just like, oh, if that happens, I need to check that. Okay, that's it, done. It's very swift and quick. But yeah, maybe what was difficult? What is it that you're really proud of the system?
That's a good question. I think the thing that I like the most about the system is probably the mind, body, and soul mechanics. That sort of that idea that you can really push yourself at a cost to achieve something, and that opens up so many avenues for GMs to think creatively about what that means. You can use that mind, body, and soul mechanic to handle things like, as well, you know, like stress and stress in sort of situations. You can use that very well in your sort of horror type games, that sort of genre. You can use those in your sort of superpowered genre to fuel abilities and things like that, to fuel magic if you want to. And just that idea that characters, you know, in that scene, that tense moment, you always get that part in your film or your book or your video game, and the characters at the absolute sort of precipice, and they dig deep and they really push and through and achieve some kind of, you know, seemingly unachievable feat by bearing some cost. That sort of mechanic in of itself, I think really drives AVBS's idea that the players, the characters and their decisions are at the heart of the game and the story. The whole system kind of supports that idea, as we just talked about, through the combat and through the idea that the GM can sort of take a back seat a little bit on the dice rolls and just let the players' actions and dice rolls inform the flow of the game. So too does mind, body and soul, that decision-making point where failed at a task, I'm going to choose to spend, I'm just going to choose to take a sacrifice a part of my character to push through. That sort of concept of the characters really making narrative decisions to push through the story and achieve goals is, again, yeah, it's a key. It's a core design principle of the game. Let the players and their actions narratively drive the story.
Fantastic.
I think the philosophical meaning of the mind, body, soul is also a really interesting idea, as opposed to, you have like HP or, sanity or some other aspects of that are just like mechanics that you are trying to keep from your, like trying to, keep control over. The mind, body, soul it is sacrificing pieces of your character throughout their journey, and it does weigh on them as they go forth in their adventure, and you can start to see it going down. And it's, I don't know, I like the philosophical part of it.
I mean,
yeah.
it is kind of achieving the flip of having these mechanics where the GM chips away the agency or the ability or the skills or the residual stamina from the players, and it gives the player the control of like how much do you want to lose your mind, your soul, how is it affecting your body. It puts literally everything in the player's control. And yeah, any choice the player makes is their choice, and they will have to deal with their consequences. They cannot blame anyone but themselves, which I appreciate, especially when in my games the focus is really on like psychological or the experience of character development. Yeah.
And I also think it contributes to a good rapport at the table, because I think there's a big misconception that games are supposed to be GM versus players. And I think giving a lot more control to the players and then having the GM just being another player at the table, giving them choices, giving their characters choices that they have to go through. I think it helps with keeping sort of animosity away from a table, and from, this idea that, GM is supposed to be trying to kill the players or whatever, that nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we provide a lot of guidance in the GM section for particularly new GMs and how to sort of run the game and how to create a scenario or even sort of world build. And I think one of the first sections we've got in there is about collaborating with the group and working together with them to sort of design the world and the philosophy that they want to work on. So we support that idea that it's a team game. It's not a competitive game between the players and the GMs.
Exactly. So yeah, coming up is the Kickstarter, soon to be released. What will be included? What can we expect here?
So we've got the full core rulebook. The system's pretty much fully written. It's illustrated. The layout and everything is done. The Kickstarter is primarily to fund the production and the printing of the physical edition. So to be clear, the Kickstarter is not for development. We've got a fully formed, ready-to-go system. We're looking to go physical. So you'll get a roughly 200-page core rulebook, which includes everything you need to play. We've touched on it's got world building and support for GMs. It's got optional rules for powers and unnatural abilities, sciences, things like that. And there's actually a tutorial scenario. So within the core rulebook itself, there's a short scenario that the new GM players can run, and it actually teaches you the mechanics and the system through the play of that scenario. And so that's the core rulebook. And then we've got the 2 fully formed adventures that are add-ons. So the Raven's Gambit is our sci-fi adventure, and Becoming is the 1950s noir adventure investigation. And they will 2 immediately available adventures to go with the core rulebook as the Kickstarter goes live.
Fantastic. What about future plans? Any ideas for expanding the system, or any new scenarios or anything?
So we plan to have the plan is to develop many scenarios for AVBS going forward. There has been talk of a shared universe and other sort of exciting things coming up. Maybe not everything we can sort of talk about right now, but it is very much a case of there will be the plan is to have lots of new scenarios that follow the Kickstarter, and we can create some settings and worlds for people to play with, or as Crystal rightly put it, it's a homebrew paradise. It's a take the core rulebook and everything you need is there. We're not doing the release half a product or release a thing, and then you need to buy the sci-fi module and the magic module and the everything's in the core rulebook. So if you want to just take the core rulebook and start building worlds, everything's there.
Yep. Yeah, and there might be even maybe a campaign or two coming up in the future, so that will be exciting. Yeah, so Crystal, do you want to maybe tell us a bit about Becoming, because that is your contribution to AVBS?
Yeah, so Becoming is a 1950s noir investigation scenario. It takes place in Los Angeles. It is a scenario that's based in reality, so there's no supernatural elements to the scenario. It is purely investigative. All of the horrors come from real life. So, yeah, it's saying that I do think I'm going to add in a section where to explain if you would like to put some supernatural elements in there, maybe how to do that as well. Yeah, your players play investigators who work for the FBI or possibly civilians who are associated with the FBI. And a man murdered somebody and he is a fugitive and you need to find him. And that's kind of all I'll say, but there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of again, it's very heavy on investigation and very cynical, very intense, morally compromised characters. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it.
And quite the noir feeling. So players are encouraged to fulfill the pulp noir setting to kind of really indulge in this. Fantastic.
What about the Raven's Gambit?
Well, the Raven's Gambit is set in a future where absolutely nothing is wrong and everybody is fine and happy. Well, almost. Not exactly, but, planets, cities change, do stuff. It is focusing on the players being hired by a, rebel leader in order to, partake in a little heist. It is their choice of finding out elements of how to achieve the heist, how to kind of incorporate their characters into the system, into the setting. But all of this is happening on this floating mega city called Arcadia Prime, and it is a beautiful kind of GM playground, pretty much open-ended with lots of different avenues to explore. I specifically kind of try to design and write it in a sense that it is not only focusing on combat achievement or like you need to kind of go in heavy arms to achieve your heist. You can do social engagement. You can do a political navigation through using the hierarchies of the city itself with various levels of government and governance. And then obviously I wanted to include something contemporary that is maybe a questionable thing, which includes, the use of AI and or the controlling powers that potential futures are. Because I'm also a very fan of dystopian novels and so forth. Hence, there is a bit of there's a bit of grungy and cynical, dark dystopian future in there, if you want to. I'm currently kind of rephrasing certain elements because it got pretty dark in my usual writing. So I'm lightening it up a bit to be a bit more palatable for the general public. And again, it includes elements to make it as dark as you want to, as dystopian sci-fi as you want to, or in a more cheery and fun atmosphere as well. And yeah, I hope it highlights a couple of the elements and incentivizes the players to kind of fully delve into character development because of body enhancement or biodiversity backgrounds, it is quite a fun playground to explore the possibilities of AVBS, I would say.
Yeah, I think both scenarios really support that sort of AVBS design concept of sort of natural storytelling, but player agency and decision making, and again GM ability. Even though these are pre-written scenarios, there are many elements within that that are kind of customizable to the GM of the table's sort of expectation or what they want to do. So they really support AVBS's sort of design style, which is very flexible, very adaptable to the different stories and the different styles and different table styles that you have as well.
Fantastic. So I guess with that, when can we expect AVBS to be live on Kickstarter?
1st of April.
Fantastic. It's not an April Fool's joke, is it?
It's not an April Fool's joke, no.
Okay, fantastic.
And it will run for a month, the whole month of April?
Yeah, 30 days, April. We plan to release playtesting material to all backers pretty much as soon as the Kickstarter is done. We aim to then collect feedback and make any final adjustments and changes to sort of print and layout over the sort of roughly 6-month period, with a view to deliver a product by the end of November, so that it will be live and available for purchase to the general public before Christmas this year.
Fantastic. Very excited to get the physical copy in my hand, despite the home printed versions. But yeah, thank you very much, Wesleigh. And you viewers, listeners, if you have more questions and concerns maybe about AVBS, or you're looking into it, links about the Kickstarter are in the descriptions. And Wesleigh, where else can people find you?
We've got a Discord server, so you can find A Very B.E.A.R community on Discord. We can add a link as well to the bio, and we have a Facebook page.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So if you enjoyed, or if we could interest you in this new Very B.E.A.R system for TTRPG playing on a narrative focus, then go check it out and ask some questions. And I'm sure that the community will respond and answer.
Yeah. David and I are also on the Discord server. You can also ask us questions on the Illusion Horror and Con server as well. And yeah, we're there. We're ready to answer any questions you have.
Fantastic. And yeah, if you are maybe a creator yourself and you have interest in promoting your material as well, also let us know. We're happy to talk about new systems, new avenues. And yeah, thank you very much. Wesleigh, that was a great insight. And we're looking forward to a fantastic release of AVBS.
Thanks very much.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.